More to Eventually Words, where we explore storytelling in all its forms. I'm Rob.
I'm Kate.
And this week we thought we'd catch up on pretty much all the things we've been up to lately that we haven't mentioned. Various trips out and about in London. It's been fairly busy, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, it has. We finally had a week off. We didn't actually go away anywhere. We had a kind of a staycation where we just did various things around London that we hadn't had a chance to do before. One particular thing which you've been looking forward to for about a year, I think.
Yeah, about a year.
By the time we got round to it.
I was just in time for my birthday this year. I was using my birthday present from last year, which you very kindly got me, which was tickets to now what do they call it? The Warner Brothers Studio Tour London.
Yes.
The Making of Harry Potter.
Yes.
Trademark. I'm sure that's the
full title.
The full title. So yes, we went on a little trip on the train out to just outside London and went to see where they filmed all the Harry Potter films.
Yeah, we did other things as well during that week. One of them was that we were very pleased to be invited to a kind of press preview of the new exhibition about Alice in Wonderland at the British Library. We'll tell you a bit about that as well. We did pop into Somerset House to have a quick look at a Tintin exhibition too. So we managed to fit in quite a few kind of book related things, but the trip to see Harry Potter was probably the biggest thing. We managed to pick a day where the weather was absolutely appalling. This was like a hurricane something, or the kind of last tail end of some hurricane or something that we managed to catch. But despite that, we still had a really nice time. We got a little bit damp on the way from Watford Station, but nonetheless, it was really interesting, really good fun.
So, for those of you that haven't been, we'll sort of talk you briefly through it. Try not to ruin any of the surprises.
Of course.
But get off at Watford Station, straight onto your Harry Potter themed bus.
Just £2.
Just £2 return. Pretty hard to miss as there's a giant Harry Potter logo slapped on the side. And then you get to sit back and get Ron Weasley's dad, whose name Arthur Weasley.
Yeah.
He talks you through, this is what you're going to see when you get there. Quick ride, and then you're finally there at the studios, which from the outside, would you say, just look like grey aircraft hangars?
Yeah, they basically just look like big old aircraft hangars, but you do have some kind of big statues of like the chess pieces.
They're all outside,
which are out the front. You can have your photo taken with them. But apart from that, it's just basically a big set of doors, some ticket windows, and just kind of go straight in really. And there's a cafe. There's somewhere to drop your coats and bags off, which is actually really handy. And then just join the exciting queue ride and start your experience.
So it sounds like they tend to theme it to different things of the year. So we're obviously here and it's all Christmas themed. There's a huge, huge Christmas tree as you go in.
It was beautiful actually.
And then as like Kate said, you then go in. So there's a few surprises, possibly don't want to give away, but there were sort of a few ooh moments, a bit like going to Disneyland.
I think what I hadn't realised is that although I knew that you go in and you're able to sort of look at and be in some of the sets, I hadn't realised that some of the things in the set would still be working. So I don't think it gives anything away to say that the first set that you see is the Great Hall.
Yes.
Which I found quite funny because those sort of very first original bits which stay throughout the whole set filming are kind of based on some of the places in Durham where I went to university. So like the Great Hall, there's some of the corridors and so on, all look a lot like some of the interiors of Durham Cathedral, which, so that was a bit surreal. And there were a few little things about that first Great Hall set which were themed for Christmas, which obviously I won't mention, but that was really fun.
But I got to open the doors as we go in because it was my birthday. There was about 4 of us in the end, and they asked like, who has your birthday here? And you put your hand up and you go to the front, and then you get to push open the doors to the Great Hall, which is kind of weird actually when I did it. That
was a real wow moment actually.
You push in the doors, they're heavy, and then you go in, and as long as you don't look up to the ceiling, because there isn't a ceiling.
There isn't a magical ceiling.
You're right there.
It was amazing.
Stone floor, everything set out for Christmas as you'd expect it in Hogwarts. They kind of pushed the tables to one side, so you kind of walk through the middle a bit more. But yeah, I kind of had a little kiddish giggle of glee when I got to push open the doors, and there you are. That's the only part really that's guided, in case you were wondering. You are sort of put into a group, and then they guide you through. But after that, you can take as long as you want.
We had audio guides, which also had video, which they're basically an iPod Touch. We did have to pay a bit extra for them. They're surprisingly honest about how they upsell you various different bits and bobs. But actually, yeah, I would really recommend them as well. They're really useful. In the introduction, we were told that the quickest anyone's ever been round was about an hour or so. And the longest that anyone's ever taken was at 13 hours.
Yeah, they must have got there at 9 in the morning, dead on, gone in, and then, I don't know, left about 10 or something. I don't know.
Yeah, it must have been some kind of special thing where it was open longer than normal.
We were there for about 5 hours.
Yes.
Does that sound about right?
That felt about right. I mean, we were quite tired by the end of that. Although we had the kind of journeying to get there as well, I guess. But yeah, that felt about right. But we took our time. We let the audio guides direct us around and kind of listen to the information about each section or each set. There's lots of really interesting information, actually, to do with how the different things had been thought up, what they were based on, the different techniques that have been used to create things. So it was really interesting. But I mean, I certainly felt it was more aimed at kind of teenagers and adults rather than children.
I would say the same thing. I think you and I've grown up with Harry Potter, and we've seen all the films, and I think we possibly are a bit more inclined to want to know a bit how it works. I think if you're a lot younger, there isn't anything to play with or touch.
No. I mean, there were a couple of more interactive bits. There's one section where you're taught how to do the stances for the wizarding duels. But that's really just kind of a guy who's on a video and someone who's doing, stopping and starting the video clip to get you to sort of copy the poses. And there are sections where you can do the kind of green screen thing and sit on a broomstick and have then a video playing behind you to make it look like you're playing Quidditch. But apart from that, there's, it's really kind of going round and looking at things and appreciating the craftsmanship and the interesting kind of behind the scenes facts. And yeah, just the fact that you're seeing things that were really in the film. And I guess it is also much more geared to the film rather than the book. That's certainly the other thing to say. There's, it is the making of the Harry Potter films. Yeah,
you occasionally get a few lines taken out from the book, highlighted at where J.K. Rowling is describing it, and then it's kind of there in front of you. But yeah, other than the very start of the tour, this is all about the films. And, rightly so, you're in a film studio. I don't want to give too much away other than say that I think, other than the Great Hall, the other bit we can talk about is you do get to walk down Diagon Alley, which is pretty weird.
Yeah, it was quite surreal, actually. I mean, it was amazing. I think that was the bit that I was most excited about, actually, because you really do feel like you're there. You're walking down the middle of the street. You've got the shops on either side of you, which are all dressed with things in the windows. It's quite bizarre, actually. But I think all the sets were fantastic. It was incredible seeing them in such detail and hearing about the way they'd been put together and, the inspirations behind them. It really was fascinating. And I think most people do now associate the look of the films and the way that the films were designed with the book. I mean, when I imagine what it's like in the book, that is kind of how I imagine it, really.
Yeah, that's fair enough. And then it ends really with the giant Hogwarts model. So that's sort of the three things that I think everyone knows, is that you go into the hall, Diagon Alley, and then it ends with Hogwarts, which this time of year is dressed up in snow, and it kind of simulates day and night going in and out.
It's really beautiful, actually.
Hogwarts. It's huge. It's much bigger than I thought it was going to be. You kind of think of a model, well, like as a model, it's a tiny model that they use for the films, but it's huge. And then they do say it kind of grew as it went on, as the series went on. They added extra bits in, but that's kind of where the tour ends. Other than, of course, you have to exit through a gift shop.
Of course.
You and I managed to spend a fair bit there. So what did you get? I've completely forgotten. You got some sweets and...
I bought myself a Hufflepuff scarf.
Mm-hmm.
I also bought you as a kind of final birthday present. I bought you a wand.
Professor Snape's wand.
Yeah, I already had one, which I bought at London Film and Comic Con / Yalc a couple of years ago. So I've got Hermione's wand, and you've got Snape's wand.
Yeah, that was a lot of debate, that one.
It took you quite a while to decide, didn't it? But then, as it should, of course.
I'm officially Slytherin, so I bought a Slytherin scarf. So I knew I wanted I wanted a wand, and actually, bizarrely, you can pick them up and hold them, and some of them aren't very that comfortable to hold.
Mm.
So I went for Professor Snape.
There you go. So that felt best to you. So, your wand has chosen you. I bought us each a chocolate frog, which are enormous. They are huge slabs of chocolate.
I haven't opened mine yet.
Really heavy.
You got the Dumbledore card,
Yeah, I got a Dumbledore card in mine. I was very pleased with that. And then you bought some Bertie Bott's Every Flavour beans.
Yes, although I made an error in that I forgot to take a picture of the colour coding description of what they taste like. So it is going to have to be... Might be a video, that one, where I just sit and watch me eat a whole packet of Bertie beans, expecting to get the disgusting ones.
Yeah, that's kind of... sweetie roulette, really. And then I bought some peppermint toads as well. Yeah. They're really nice, actually. They're dark chocolate with a kind of peppermint flavour. Yeah, they kind of taste like After Eights, but without the squishy bit in the middle. Yeah. Which I'm quite glad about, because I'm not sure I'd want a toad with a squishy green bit in the middle.
No. That was it. I bought a guidebook, which I haven't really looked at since, to look back on. But yeah.
We took tons of photos. They actually encourage you to take photos.
That's what I like. Some places, just like, we'll get to that later, when you're never sure and you're just straight out not allowed to take any pictures. But yeah, they're really encouraging. I took hundreds. I need to go through them all and put them up.
I've taken loads as well. I've shared a few, but only a few, just sort of via Instagram and whatnot. But yeah, I've got absolutely tons on there that I want to put up. I'll sort of put up on Flickr for those of you who still use Flickr. Yeah. And link to those. But
I will as well.
Yeah, it was really fascinating. As much as someone who's interested in film and film production, as someone who is a Harry Potter fan, I think.
Yeah, I'd hardly recommend it. You get to go across 2 film studios, Studio J and Studio K. You get to go outside for a little bit. There's the buses there and Privet Drive. We couldn't go on the wonky bridge, as I like to call it.
But I think that was because of the weather, actually, because it was very wet and slippery. Yeah. So that was closed. But I know normally you can stand on the bridge and have your picture taken there, looking out wistfully. Yeah, it was really fascinating. And, the kind of behind the scenes look at all how the animatronics are done and the green screen and all that kind of thing was, with costumes. It was really fascinating.
And if Warner Brothers want to make a killing, they just need to sell butterbeer. Because we tried butterbeer. We had a tankard each. I absolutely loved it.
I thought it was all right, actually.
Really tasty.
It's kind of like a Coke float or something like that.
Yeah, it does shatter the illusion slightly when it shows you kind of how they made it. But I'd heartily recommend that. They also do butterbeer ice cream now as well.
There we go.
So yeah, I'd recommend that. Shall we move on to Alice?
Let's.
So we're invited to the press preview. This is at the British Library. The exhibition is running now. It's... I don't want to say in the lobby, but it's just slightly up the stairs as you go in.
It's on kind of a mezzanine floor, basically. So as you go into the main entrance of the British Library, you've got the reception desk ahead of you, but there's also stairs going upwards next to the reception desk. So basically, if you just go up those stairs, you've got this kind of mezzanine floor, and the exhibition kind of guides you round. You've got some mirrors and panels which tell the kind of main plot points of the story.
Sure, it basically recaps the story for you in case you're not sure, or one of the many versions of the story.
Or seen the Disney film, actually, because that doesn't have all of the plot points of the original book. And then you've got the exhibition, which also kind of takes you round in sections from a bit about Charles Dodgson, Lewis Carroll himself, the inspiration of the story, how it came to be first published, and then, eventually on to all the different kind of more modern interpretations.
So you get to see some of the original manuscripts. There's original diaries. There's original illustrations. I think it really sort of guides you through chronologically all the way through Alice and the sort of inspiration for other works that she's had. One thing that surprised me actually was how quickly the story had fallen out of copyright.
Yeah.
And then you suddenly get all these Alice knockoffs of different interpretations, different stories. Because Carroll tried to sort of, they say he self-published it. He sort of funded the book.
Yeah,
It was published by Macmillan.
Yeah, it was published by Macmillan, but he paid for the production of, the first edition, basically. And there was, in fact, a whole first edition which was scrapped because the quality of the illustration printing wasn't clear enough. So they had a whole first edition which pretty much got pulped, apart from 1 or 2 copies which escaped that fate for some reason.
Well, they sent them to America, didn't they? He thought the Americans weren't too bothered about the quality of the book. So he was definitely a perfectionist. He knew what he wanted. He knew the vision that he was after, which is all very interesting. And you kind of see as the Alice sort of progresses, it sort of becomes part of popular culture. Yes, there is a bit about the Disney film, and then at the very, very end, you sort of see it in its most sort of modern incarnation, which is through a couple of video games.
I think that kind of idea of going through the looking glass, all the surreal things that she comes across, been really popular with different generations, and it kind of shows that. I mean, you get the kind of very surrealist interpretations, all these different illustrators. I think that was what I found most interesting, actually, the different illustrations and how they've picked up on different things that were relevant in culture at the time. So you had the kind of Dali-esque type illustrations. You have Mervyn Peake, who you might know as the writer and also illustrator of the Gormenghast books, which were extremely dark. It showed you how the illustrations for the editions that were published during World War II were actually quite bland.
Yeah.
Just focused on the more upbeat things, but then the kind of post-war ones were much more downbeat and picking out the darker side, kind of more analysing the traumatic things that had happened and how each generation has kind of picked up on these different things. I mean, obviously there's a song about the White Rabbit, and it's kind of all the psychedelia later on in the 60s, and all these different interpretations, and then right up to the modern day where it's kind of becoming interactive computer games, or much more abstract, I guess. Much newer interpretations. But then there's still, popular things that now going right back to the original, they're kind of more retro look. I think it's just such an interesting story. It's just been picked up on in so many different ways.
Yeah, I'd recommend going through it as they suggest, and it does actually guide you through with lots of signs like this way to go this way and things like that.
Which is obviously very reminiscent of the way that the book works, because she's always being kind of pushed on to the next adventure.
But start as they suggest and follow it through, and you really do get a really good understanding of the inspiration behind it and the story and how it really sort of took over what it is now. I mean, people still talk about following the White Rabbit and Alice. There's that latest Disney one, which I wasn't too keen on, but
the Tim Burton ones, But I mean, there's all sorts of references that there's in the Matrix. There's that reference, isn't there, at the beginning of the Matrix about following the White Rabbit, and we talk about going down a rabbit hole.
Yeah.
When we're talking about getting lost on the internet or something, going down a YouTube rabbit hole,
Wikipedia rabbit hole. Yeah. And there's a great pop-up shop there as well. It's very anything. I mean, you took a lot of photos in there as well.
I did, I probably took almost as many photos in the shop as I did in the exhibition. I would say that I'm not sure how much photography is encouraged in general in that exhibition, but we were okay because we were there on the kind of preview day. But I took a lot of pictures in the pop-up shop, which is when you're on the ground floor kind of reception level. It's just over on your right, the opposite side of the foyer from the main British Library shop. But I found that really interesting because what the British Library actually did was to reach out to Etsy, and they held a competition. They kind of put out a challenge to Etsy sellers and makers to kind of put forward their best Alice in Wonderland related creations. So there's lots of things which are original creations which have been produced specifically for this pop-up shop. So there was particularly kind of an acrylic plastic jewellery maker who'd made loads of fantastic, like absolutely brilliant Alice in Wonderland themed jewellery, which I'm a big fan of. People might know, people might have seen my various kind of acrylic necklaces and whatnot. So there's quite a few photos there, but there's also some like lovely cushions, and there's some lovely like ceramics. Obviously the kind of whole having a tea party thing is quite relevant, and there's also loads of beautiful editions of different Alice related books which you can buy. I bought a particular edition of Alice which is by a Japanese writer and slash illustrator slash artist, and she kind of sees the world in dots. Yeah, and I just thought the illustrations were amazing. They kind of reminded me of that eye test thing you do when you're little to see if you're colourblind or not, whether you can see the different colour letters standing out in the different dots. But yeah, there's all sorts of really interesting stuff in that shop.
Yes, the exhibition's on now, and that's at the British Library.
And that's going on well into 2016.
Yeah. So after that, finally we got to Somerset House for an exhibition of Tintin, which is one of my favourites.
Well, it was more about Hergé, I thought.
Yeah, I think it was billed as Hergé's Tintin, but it was, well, I mean, it's a good exhibition in that you should try and learn about the man behind it, and I was quite fascinated by that. Sadly, this one you weren't allowed to take any pictures.
No, that was a bit of a shame.
I was a bit disappointed about.
Although we have seen someone's photo of it pop up on Twitter since.
So I was like, raised eyebrows there. Yeah, it's currently running at Somerset House. It's free to go into. It's quite short, especially compared to maybe the Alice one.
I mean, it was weird because the Alice exhibition doesn't take up very much space, but it's absolutely packed.
There's lots in it, yes. And the Tintin one obviously focuses mostly on the art, and it guides you through sort of Hergé's life. It takes you through all the Tintin books. There's quite a lot of original artwork there, which is on the walls, which is great to see. And it sort of shows you Hergé's influences, because he did a lot of research. They're quite actually accurate when you look at some of the Tintin stuff. But for me, it was quite a nice nostalgia trip.
Yeah, because you're quite a Tintin fan, aren't you?
Yeah, I grew up with it. Not the original 60s cartoon series that my parents talk about, but I think you and I watched it was on Channel 4, a more modern adaptation.
I remember watching that, and I did really enjoy it. I would say I didn't find the Tintin exhibition as interesting as I did the Alice exhibition.
There wasn't as much.
There wasn't as much to read. Some of the big centerpieces of the rooms were basically just kind of models of scenes from the stories, without any particular content attached to them. So for me, I'm not as knowledgeable about it. It didn't really kind of tell me that much. But then there were things that I found out that I didn't know before, the kind of way he got into it by doing the sort of general children's cartoons in this sort of pull-out section from the newspaper. And also, interestingly, how, I think there's been some discussion about how the early Tintins are, shall we say, not exactly PC.
Well, I think you could quite easily say that the early ones are quite racist in context of the time.
But that actually he met a couple of people who really changed his view of the world.
He had an assistant who basically told him to research these stories properly, and that kind of changed the way the stories went forward.
Well, I thought that was really interesting, actually, because we're talking quite a long time ago here, but he did realise that perhaps he was taking not the right approach to writing these stories about different cultures, that he was really just using stereotypes. So he tried to actually do a lot more research into the cultures that he was writing about. And I thought, I was like, oh, good for you, Hergé.
So I thought it was good. It interested me. You get to see some of the original artwork. You learn a lot more about Hergé himself. It's not the greatest of exhibitions, but then,
we spent about 15 minutes.
It was like 15 minutes.
As opposed to sort of, probably, you could, if you really read everything in the Alice one, you could probably take about an hour, I think.
Obviously, the Tintin one's dual language as well.
Oh, yes.
So there's that to remember. But I guess, in their defence, there is an actual Hergé museum in Belgium, I believe. And
yes, there is.
This one, this exhibit, does have a gift shop. There isn't very much there, but then there is the Tintin shop in Covent Garden.
Yeah, it's mainly the Tintin books and then some really expensive mugs in Somerset House.
Well, I do want a model rocket now, if that's all right. Yeah.
Well, if you, yeah,
It's only
you
a couple
know.
of £100.
Not sure about that. I quite like the shark submarine. It's quite fun.
Ah, yes. And I've already got a cuddly Snowy.
You've got a cuddly Snowy and a little model of Tintin and Snowy on the moon in their
Yeah.
spacesuits.
Well, I'm really tempted now to reread them in order. I've always wanted to do that, and I've still got a few that I'm missing slightly. But I do want to reread them again, because you got me that companion book.
I did.
And I want to read them side by side, so to speak. You know, read
Yeah,
the book,
so I
read the
suppose
story,
you,
read
yeah,
the
you
companion.
get it in context.
Yeah, so I think that's left me a little inspired in project, maybe over Christmas. Because they're only about 60 pages long.
Yeah, they're not very big.
Yeah, I reckon I could do that quite easy. So that might be my next little challenge.
Yeah, so those are some bookish expeditions that we've been on recently that we've enjoyed. I mean, I think we definitely recommend the Harry Potter tour. It's not cheap, but I mean, we certainly felt like we got our money's worth.
We were there a long while.
Yeah. Yeah, the green screen stuff is all of that kind of thing. You have to pay extra. You don't have to pay extra to join in, but you do have to pay extra if you want any photo or anything to take away with you. So that is just something to bear in mind. We kind of went and sat in a carriage and did that kind of thing, but we didn't buy the photo afterwards.
Oh, we got attacked by a Dementor, didn't we?
Yeah, yes. We did. So yeah, it's just something to bear in mind. It's not a cheap trip.
I'd say it would be quite tricky to get out there without spending any extra money.
I think it would be.
It's a bit like a theme park.
In that way.
Yeah.
I think I would definitely recommend the Alice exhibition. If you're kind of a bookie person, if you're interested in Alice in Wonderland, I think there's definitely some things that you'll find out and that you'll find interesting. And I would recommend, if you're thinking about buying a Christmas present for someone bookie, having a look in the pop-up shop as well. And I think you can probably buy things online.
Yeah, probably, yeah.
As well.
So that's it for this week. Next week we're going to try and do things slightly different going forward into next year. Is that we're actually going to start looking ahead to some of the books that are coming out. So we're going to be going through some of the books that have caught our eye that are coming out in January. Some new fiction, non-fiction and kids books, I think.
Indeed. And of course we're getting close to Christmas, so we'll tell you a little bit more about our special Christmas episode plans, and then for New Year's we're planning to do our roundup of our favourite reads of 2015.
Which always includes, of course, the Simon Savage Nazi Book Awards. I don't know if I've read any books with Nazis in
No, I'm going to have to think about that, actually.
Yeah. If you're not sure what that is, go back to last year's one. That's probably a bit more explanatory. If you'd like to get in touch, you can do that in a number of ways. You can send us an email on contact@adventureswithwords.com. We're on Facebook, facebook.com/adventureswithwords. We're also on Twitter @wordadventures. You can also find us on Instagram, and you can head over to the blog and leave a comment under any of our posts.
You certainly can. We love to hear from you. If you've been to any really good bookish exhibitions or trips or anything like that, we'd love to hear about those as well.
I've been Rob. You can follow me during the week on Twitter and on Instagram @RobJola.
And you can follow me during the week on Twitter and Instagram @magic_kitten.
Thanks for listening. I think that would be serious podcast etiquette rules broken if you had your phone out.
Why are you recording?
I don't know when you press record.